Chapter 5, Lowestoft, December 2019. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying, and the flung spray, and the blown spume, and the seagulls crying. That's from John Masefield's poem, Sea Fever. In mid-December, I grow used to the daily ritual of wrapping myself up in a warm scarf, stretching my orange woolen stocking cap over my head, pulling on my gloves, and walking in sensible fur-lined boots to the Cambridge University Library. In the frosty, diminishing darkness of most mornings, I leave my college flat, read all day in the drafty warmth of the library, and return to my rooms in the shivering jet-black darkness of evening. The lampposts with their circles of light and the illuminated windows of dwellings lining Grove Avenue and Selwyn Gardens guide me to the college's back gates. Only the occasional irregularity interrupts this routine, such as when, much to my embarrassment, I accidentally set off the fire alarm in my flat and the porters raced up the stairs to investigate. I had burned some chicken in the oven. Or when an intimidating librarian chided me for talking on my cell phone in the hallway leading to the library lobby. I feel like a child caught misbehaving in a boarding school. To relieve this sporadic severity, as well as the dreariness of winter, weather permitting, I sometimes wander through the meadows by the River Cam down to Grantchester and back. But these strolls pose problems, for the ubiquitous mud of the season is formidable, especially when it doggedly clings to my hiking boots. One early evening, I literally spent 2 hours by an outside tap, normally used by the college gardeners, desperately trying to rid my filthy footwear of crusted clumps of clay mixed with fallen leaves, small stones, twigs, and tufts of grass. It is a stubborn mess. Amidst this toil, the opening line from John Masefield's Sea Fever, I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and sky, drifts into and lodges within my mind, so that my thoughts turn once more to the East Anglia Coast. I long to feel the sea breezes graze my skin, gaze upon the troubled skies above the North Sea, and, I hasten to add, stroll without tromping through muck. I yearn to get away, even for a weekend. It's not long before I start searching for a seaside destination. Reliant upon where the train services will take me, I decide to go to Lowestoft, the second largest seaside town in Suffolk, about 10 miles south of Yarmouth. It's a place scarcely familiar to me. I know it by name only, though I am aware that, like Yarmouth, from the mid-17th century up until the early years of the 20th century, Lowestoft had been a thriving fishing port. Initially, this destination had attracted the Dutch, who in the 1600s dominated the fishing trade and its related enterprises. By the end of the 18th century, however, when the French wars brought an end to the Dutch presence, the British reclaimed their territory and crowded Lowestoft's harbour and beaches with fleets of their own fishing boats. A century later, in the 1880s, 139 trawlers and 312 drifters docked in the town's port. A 1914 postcard showing trawlers crowding Lowestoft Harbour, which I later buy in an antique shop, offers some idea of what the scene must have been like. The herring catch was both plentiful and profitable, so abundant, in fact, that according to a 1902 Pearson's gossipy guide, fishermen were often obliged to cut their nets, lest they should sink under the weight of fish, and were known to throw back as many herrings as they caught. Indeed, in October 1913, no less than 535 million herrings were netted, a bounty that was gutted, pickled, and packed by working women ashore. A photograph from the early 1900s shows just how messy and raw and pungent their job must have been. Eventually, trawlers, many of them converted to steam, deploying large closed nets that were dragged along the sea bottom, also ensnared tons of cod, plaice, haddock, and skate, and occasionally, according to a 19th century economist, relics of an older world, such as the teeth and bones of prehistoric beasts. Rudyard Kipling, in his 1917 poem, The Lowestoft Boat, set to music by Edward Elgar for 4 baritones and orchestra, celebrates this prosperous industry and recalls that during World War I, some of these steam-powered fishing boats, fitted with 13-pounder guns, occasionally supplemented and fought alongside the naval ships in attempts to sink German submarines. The initial verses of Kipling's robust sea chanty refers to these brave efforts. In Lowestoft a boat was laid, mark well what I do say. And she was built for the herring trade, but she has gone a-roving, 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 the Lord knows where. They gave her government coal to burn, and a QF gun at bow and stern, and sent her out a-roving, the Lord knows where. So prolific was the fishing that in the early 1840s, a railway line between Lowestoft and Norwich and Ipswich was constructed to transport fresh supplies of fish to the London markets and Midland city centres like Manchester in time for high tea. The fish were transported on specially insulated trains. All too predictably, however, beginning in the early 20th century, the supplies started to decline. Overfishing with newly designed nets that increased the catching power were the offenders. Inevitably, in the 1960s, as a consequence of pushing the stock beyond its biological limit, what was once a prosperous livelihood markedly began to disappear. By 2011, only 3 traders remained in the town's fish market. Thankfully, a segment of the railway service, the unpretentious Wherry Line train, somehow survived, but on a reduced schedule and sometimes only running 1 carriage, making my weekend excursion possible. I am later to learn that the fishing trade and its attendant ventures had not been the only source of the town's earlier prosperity. In the 19th century, a profitable commerce in grain, malt, ironworks, boatyards, brickfields, porcelain, pottery, ship and coach building had added to Lowestoft's fortunes. And later, in the 20th century, the food processing industry, as well as attempts to extract oil and gas from the North Sea, had also contributed to the town's business prospects. One result was that in 1971, Lowestoft's population increased 3-fold, from 4,647 inhabitants in 1841 to 13,620. Moreover, this coastal town was once a celebrated high-class watering place, like Yarmouth, even more popular than Brighton. From the mid-Victorian age until the 1960s, Lowestoft's extensive and award-winning sandy beaches had attracted thousands of day trippers, as well as middle-class holidaymakers who crowded onto its far-reaching sands and stayed in seafront hotels or lodging houses. An influx of wealthy tourists had also relaxed in the area's holiday villas, grand hotels and spas. Postcards from the 1950s show throngs of people lolling on striped deck chairs, licking melting ice cream cones, strolling about or paddling in the sea while children play with their buckets and spades, flock before Punch and Judy shows, and chase each other into the surf. Now, as I am to witness in 2019, much has changed. Lowestoft is no longer deemed to be a desirable holiday destination, nor is it considered to be a thriving, bustling community. The public has deserted the seaside town and gone elsewhere. I was soon to see that in spite of multiple determined efforts to bring the place back to life, the area continues to suffer and is thought to be among the more socially deprived areas in England. The loss of various businesses and sources of income has resulted in pockets of pervasive poverty, deprivation, chronic health problems, and poor housing, all of which have triggered a high concentration of emotional, social, financial, and physical problems. Many residents are now trapped in what a reporter from The Guardian, when recently writing about Lowestoft, refers to as the shit life syndrome. As a result of the town's current depreciation, when I inform the Wilson College porter where I have chosen to go for the weekend, he abruptly dismisses my idea and suggests I should travel elsewhere. Why don't you just spend the time in Norwich? Determined to dissuade me, he adds that the only memory he has of Lowestoft is the rank smell of processed peas. Apparently, the Lowestoft branch of Bird's Eye Frozen Foods specializes in treating and packaging frozen peas imported from Australia. Once Lowestoft had been the home to Wessex Foods that specialized in preparing frozen burgers and mincemeat. After a fire in 2015, this plant shut down. Its closure followed the demise in 2000 of the CWS canning factory that had since the 1930s been yet another food processing plant.